There's dozens of these quilts having these patterns, but for some reason, no one has taken the time to look at the pattern and coordinate these patterns on the quilts with the histories of these families like I've done here. So, my reception at museums and talking with curators is rather abrupt, because they'd rather not deal with this. They want to just brush it aside and say, that's a crazy quilt and that's enough. But as you see, it's worth another look. Dealing with people who were familiar with the Underground Railroad. Fairly well documented that they were ex-slaves, that they traveled perhaps on the Underground Railroad. We're using an iconic representation in the quilt. And by that I mean we're using icons to establish something. This shouldn't be foreign to us, because in this photo that I took in Portland, Oregon, we have in 2009 an iconic representation of something. Picture's worth several thousand words. And this is the kind of concept that we're going to deal with when we deal with this quilt. We're dealing with iconic representations of factual matter, and we're going to deal with an understanding of these icons to get to the meaning of the quilt. We're dealing with a family of escaped slaves who lived in southern Ohio, who lived in the heart of Underground Railroad activity. A book was put out called Hidden in Plain View by Jacqueline L. Tobin and Raymond G. Dovar. This came out in, I believe it was 1999, and these authors, who are educators, historians, they contacted an elderly woman who revealed what she understood was a code that went on quilts for the Underground Railroad that existed and was passed on through an oral tradition in her family for many generations. As far as icons, there's another very important thing that I need to point out. The question is, there's two fans on here. One fan is, you know, normal fan shape, but this one is tilted. Why is this fan tilted? I looked long and hard to find some way to relate this tilt to the real world. And what I found, to my surprise, is that if you go to the town of Middleport, which this icon can be presumed to represent, on any given day you're in Middleport, the wind will blow from one direction. It will blow in the exact direction that this fan is pointed. This wind direction for an escaped slave is a very important thing to know. So it's not easy for a person to avoid capture from these bloodhounds and other animals who can sense them. So if you know which way the wind is blowing, it's going to give you a very clear direction of which way you need to go. Another feature that is on the quilt, as I mentioned before, is the 9-square pattern, which gives you this reference of northeast and south. I've got a photo of a typical crazy quilt, okay? And in this crazy quilt, there is no such 9-square pattern. And if you look at this, Or is he trying to find some point of reference or anything like we have on ours? So I just present this in order to have an example of what a crazy quilt actually is. I hope this presentation is clear enough to get some understanding of this, and for those historians out there. And trust me, there are many, many who believe that this quilt code is a bunch of hokey pokey. They believe that this whole business of quilt code is a myth. And my purpose here is to present this material in hopes that we'll all have a chance to take a closer look at that. And anyone who's going to present a theory that the quilt code is a myth is perhaps going to have to think a little harder. Perhaps going to have to think a little harder. Perhaps going to have to